Welcome in, ladies and gents, to the Crosstown Baseball Show. Thanks for joining us today as we dive into our third and final of the division preview series that we're putting together before spring training. As always, I'm your host, Anthony Schullo. Here at the Crosstown Baseball Show, if you're new to our show, we are your home for Chicago Cubs and Chicago White Sox talk. And we're a little different than a lot of the shows out there. We don't throw stats at you. We don't get down in the nitty-gritty into the weeds. We're just two fans with a lot of thoughts and a lot of feelings. And we lead with our heart and our mind, talking about our two favorite teams here in Chicago. And I can't think of anyone else that I love doing that with than my friend and co-host, Anthony Romanelli. Romanelli, how are you?
Doing well. Yeah, doing well. Had a good week. Excited to talk about the AL and NL West, more the NL West because I don't like anybody in the AL West, but that's okay.
Well, you don't have a lot of great options. We'll talk about that.
No.
But we
so
are
many questions.
There's so many questions that we're going to get into. So what we're going to do today, folks, if you didn't go ahead and catch our previous two division previews, we started with the NL and the AL Central for obvious reasons. We last week talked about the East divisions, and then today we're wrapping up talking about the AL West and NL West. So if you haven't gone back and watched those previews or listened to those, please do so. You can find us on YouTube, where we actually go ahead and do the video version of our shows. And then, of course, anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can catch anywhere you listen to podcasts. And you can see Romanelli, per usual, has his subscribe on YouTube sign.
For the record, my 15-year-old made fun of this sign yesterday.
Did she really?
She did. I was like, it's serious fourth grade excellence. Look at that.
You know what? You know what you should do is, if she's going to poke fun and give you shit about it, have her make the sign.
I should. I really should. All right, let's see you do one better.
Yeah, exactly. 15-year-olds. So I have a long way to go. My kids are 4 and 6 months, so I'm kind of learning from the master over here with the teens.
Yes.
So let's dive into it, folks. We are talking AL, NL West. Let's start with the AL West. What we've been doing with our previews is we've been going over the standings and reviewing kind of where these teams fell in 2022. And then after, we're going to talk about, up to this point, what impact adds have the teams made in the offseason. So before we start talking about the details and getting into the AL West, let's look at exactly where they fell in 2022. So on the top of the pack, per usual, for the last 5 to 6 years now, was the Houston Astros.
Boo!
Strong feelings.
Pieces of swear words.
Pieces of swear words.
There are so many swear words.
Well, pretty soon here, I'm going to give you your soapbox, and you can scream to the mountaintops.
I don't even need it.
You don't? Okay.
We'll see.
Beautiful. So they did walk away with 106 wins. They obviously won that division with 106 wins, 56 losses, and a plus 219 run differential. The Seattle Mariners, the up-and-coming Seattle Mariners, had a really strong season, getting a wild card spot with 90 wins and 72 losses. They had a plus run differential as well. And then the bottom of the pack in the AL West, of course, was the Angels, Rangers, and the lowly A's that rounded them out with 60 wins and a negative 202 run differential. So here we go. We're looking at Houston, Seattle, Angels, Rangers, and A's. And that's how the division standings actually fell last year. Now, anything particular kind of stand out to you about these standings for 2022?
Not really. I feel for the Angels. When you have a player like Ohtani and you have a player like Trout, and you don't have management smart enough to build around them, like, shame on you. How can you not? You have the arguably two of the best players. They're on a path to be two of the best players in the history of the game. And you don't have the smarts to get enough around them to make them contenders. When you're 16 games under 500, when you're 45 runs, when you're negative 45 runs, that wasn't Joe Madden's fault.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he can only manage with what he has. His replacement, he can only manage with what he has. So the Angels, I feel bad for, and again, part of it is personal because I had the very good fortune of when I went to Baltimore on vacation, I got to go to Oriole Stadium and see Trout play. And in that game, he made this unbelievable catch, and then he hit a home run. I'm like, yep, he's the real deal. Just everything about that guy is the real deal. And to see him live I felt lucky. You know, you get lucky when you get to see certain players play live. I got to see Trout before Ohtani was there. So Ohtani is next on my list to want to go see. But if we read between the lines with Ohtani, do you know who he just signed a shoe deal with?
New Balance.
And do you know where New Balance's headquarters are?
I don't. Tell me.
I do. Boston.
Huh.
That's not an accident.
You really don't? You don't think it's just a coincidence?
No. I think he's going to the Red Sox. Think about it from if you're Ohtani, although I don't know that he wants to go to the East Coast. But if you're Ohtani, do you want to play in the National League or stay in the American League? I mean, ultimately everything's the same now, right? Because, you know, the DH and all that stuff. But I don't think the New Balance, the trip out to New York, and I don't think that was an accident. I think that was the writing on the wall. I'll be really, really curious. And he was super pissed that he didn't get MVP of the year. So he's going to play out of his mind. He's going to ask for money out of his mind. The Red Sox need to compete. They were so bad last year, and we talked about that last week. Mm-hmm. I think that he's going to be their splash. The Cubs and the White Sox, they're not going to touch him. They don't have that kind of money. The Mets aren't going to touch him. The Yankees, I don't even think are going to touch him. I just don't. I think the Red Sox will be. And I know I'm a little off topic, but it's about Ohtani specifically and the Angels. I feel bad for the Angels.
Yeah,
I just do.
I don't blame you. First, I'll say, you know, I think New Balance just got Ohtani because they're trying to make New Balance cool again. And I think if you want to do that, Ohtani's your guy.
Yep. It's actually working. I think
have you bought a new pair of New Balance since Ohtani signed?
I have not, but I do recall. I swear to God, I know that Kyle Hendricks wears New Balance. As dumb as that sounds, I know that. There's your dumb Cub fact. Your random dumb Cub fact.
Of course, you would know that. You know which guy's wearing which shoes.
Exactly.
What I will say is you bring up when you're talking about the Angels a really good point. Going back to Trout and Ohtani for a second. It's sad because they're generational talents, but here's what it reminds me of. It reminds me of the great Ernie Banks, who was such an incredible athlete, who never, ever won a World Series, got to go deep in the playoffs with the Cubs. And what if that happens with Trout and Ohtani? If they stay with that team, there's these great, great players who are never on the national stage because their team doesn't go to the playoffs. That's really sad.
And you forget about Pujols when he played with the Angels.
Right? Fell off the face of the earth.
Yeah. And with Trout and Pujols, and you can't win?
Well, the last thing I'll say about the Angels, folks, is, you know, for any of you, if you happen to know any Angels fans out there, or maybe it's your second team, the Angels, but what I will say is I think Angels fans got really excited earlier this year, middle of last year, when they heard that Artie Moreno, their owner, was going to sell the team, and then a couple weeks ago says, oh, yeah, just kidding. Never mind. I'm going to keep it. And I'm sure that just pissed the fans off.
Oh, agreed. Completely agree.
So So we'll see what happens. I mean, if they had made some additions, which talking about additions, let's go ahead and move over to those impact ads and talk about exactly what the teams in the AL West did this offseason thus far. So we'll start obviously in standing order, and of course, the name at the very top is White Sox legend Jose Abreu, picked up by the Astros. Oh, it's. I can't even tell you how much it irks me, and I can't even tell you how frustrating it's going to be when the Sox open the season in Houston on March 30th, playing Jose Abreu and the Astros.
Yep. And I know you and I talked about this, but I cannot remember if it was online or offline. I got to see Jose Abreu a few years ago up close and personal. He is a big, big boy. And the Houston Minute Maid Park is a tiny, tiny park.
Mm-hmm.
He is going to destroy that ball. He makes them a very powerful team. He just does. And I hate that Houston is going to stay powerful. I can't. It just the cheating thing will live with them for until every one of those players is gone from that team. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to live. The hatred's going to be there for as long as Tiny Tim plays second base. It's going to stay there.
That's Jose Altuve for those who don't get the Tiny Tim reference.
Yeah.
Here's what I'll say.
Yeah.
Here's what I'll say about that is you and I are on the same page, as are, I'm sure, all fans out there, right? Houston Astros, the cheating scandal. I mean, to this day, we still talk about it, and we're still all kind of irritated with it. But the further we get away from that, there is no denying that this Astros team is the premier team in the American League, and they are talented. And going back to what you said, this edition of Jose Abreu, they take away from the Sox, number one, but they really round out their team to really bring a great back-to-ball contact hitter who can hit for power despite, Jose Abreu's power numbers being low last year. You're right. In a smaller ballpark, he can pop a few out with his good bat-to-ball skills. So when I look at Abreu going to the Astros and the White Sox choice not to bring him back, for Jose the person, I hope he finds success, and I hope he continues to be successful for the next few years. From a pure baseball standpoint, and I know many Sox fans aren't going to agree with me here, I could understand, not agree, but I could understand why the White Sox moved off of a Jose Abreu. Yeah, he made good contact last year, but guess what? Those balls weren't going out of the park. His power numbers were down. There's some things he struggled with last year. So when does Jose Abreu regress like other players do? Is it next year as he goes into age 37, 38 seasons? That's a big question mark. And so when you have a guy like Andrew Vaughn who's waiting in the wings to actually play his freaking position at first base, I understand why they didn't re-sign him. And so I'm torn between, do I wish him well to play good baseball, or does he regress and the White Sox come up looking like they made a great decision?
Maybe a little bit of both. You wish him well because he was such a good player, but you hope every time that the White Sox play Houston that the White Sox win. You want Abreu to go 4 for 4, but to have the White Sox win. That's what you want every time. Every game, every time. I will be curious from Houston's perspective because Verlander, if I'm not mistaken, won the Cy Young last year. Pitched out of his mind. And who are they going to get to replace Verlander?
I mean, I'll tell you something about the Astros though. Like they have some of that just magic juice for the Astros, where when it comes to their pitching, I mean, they always seem to have a next man up, somebody in the wings. So if you look at like their staff going into 2023, Framber Valdez, Christian Javier, Lance McCullers we're aware of, Luis Garcia, Jose Urquidy, all of these folks have major league experience, and they're all really solid pitchers, and that's not even counting their depth. So if any team can survive the loss of Justin Verlander, unfortunately, it's sure as hell the Astros.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I'm just curious about the pitching leadership then. So who's your number one? Who takes the lead? Like, if Houston and there was, had gone to a game seven, you give Verlander the ball, that kind of thing. I don't know that anybody on Houston has scares anybody. So we'll see, pitching wise. I know they're solid. They are solid. And I think Seattle will give them a run for their money with a couple of their additions that we'll talk about in a minute. I think Seattle will give them a run for their money, but I do not see Houston falling just yet.
Yeah, I completely agree. Let's get through the rest of this list here, and then we'll talk about the remainder of the team. So you mentioned Seattle. Seattle did actually make some impact additions. They added former Cub infielder Tommy La Stella, but that's not really impact. But for sake of our discussions, I include, former Cubs and Sox in this list. Speaking of former Sox, outfielder A.J. Pollock they added second baseman Colton Wong from the Brewers, and then they added outfielder Teoscar Hernandez. If we go down to the A's, I keep saying A's because there's literally an A in front of me. The Angels, they added utility man Brendan Drury, starting pitcher Tyler Anderson, who had last year a great season with the Dodgers, outfielder Hunter Renfroe, and infielder Gio Urshela. The Rangers went nuts with their starting pitching.
They did.
I mean, it's impressive. Starting with a hopefully healthy Jacob deGrom. They added a relief pitcher in Ian Kennedy who can flex to the rotation. And they added a handful of starters, Danny Duffy, Nathan Eovaldi, Andrew Heaney, and Jake Odorizzi. And then the A's, I just put white flag because they're not doing shit, which is an absolute travesty. And we can have a philosophical discussion on why that's all sorts of wrong. But what is your read on the AL West after some of these additions?
I like what Texas did. I think Texas is trying to make a name for themselves with all those starting pitching additions. DeGrom especially, Eovaldi especially, even Kennedy, all of those are solid pickups. So from a pitching perspective, they couldn't have done any better. That's all they picked up. Now, do they have the hitting to back up the pitching? My answer to that is no, not when you're, again, negative 36 in the run differential and 20 some odd games under 500. I don't know that they've got the hitting talent to matter. So maybe next year at the end of this baseball year, they load up on hitting and see what happens there. I don't think Texas is. I like that of all the teams. I think they made the biggest splash in the AL West. Even like Abreu's one person. Texas went nuts with their pitching, almost the way the Mets went nuts with their money. So I like what Texas did. I do. The Angels, when the first guy on the list for the Angels is your utility specialist, Brandon Drury, I don't think that that's saying a lot. So I don't know. I like Renfroe. I do. I think that's a good pickup. We'll see if he makes enough of an impact. Seattle with La Stella. The A's white flag is just that. We don't know. There were talks last year about the A's moving to Vegas. It makes me sad.
Well, here, I'll tell you this. So it's funny you bring up the Vegas thing because just last week, it may have been in the last few days, actually. My timing's all jacked up. But they look like Vegas is going to be open to welcoming the A's with open arms. They're deciding between two different areas right on the Strip where they can build a stadium. And quite frankly, as a Vegas goer myself, I love going to Vegas. That's really exciting to me that, now that they have a football team, they have the Raiders, they have the Golden Knights. It only is natural they have a baseball team. I'm all in. I am all in on them going to Vegas. That would be exciting.
I will be on a plane with you. As a matter of fact, that's what we should do. If they go next year, we'll go. We should.
Totally.
That would be a blast. That would also make it another, stadium that I've seen that I haven't. Although I never got to the Coliseum, I'll be honest with you. Never got to the Oakland Coliseum. So yeah, to me, the team that's made the biggest splash in the AL West is Texas with the pitching.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. It'll be interesting to see if with Texas and all those pitching ads, if you like you said, their offense really comes together. Because if you remember, folks, last offseason, the Rangers added presumably two big bats in Corey Seager and Marcus Semien, who had down years last year. So
Yeah.
you would hope that with them and some of their younger guys, again with this pitching staff they built, that they can pull off 68 wins in 2022. Maybe you push them up to 75, 80 if everything's clicking. Sounds like the Sox. Everything's got to click for them to win some ball games. But here's what I'll say about the AL West before we move on over is, this AL West is very similar to me, very similar to the AL East that we talked about last week. And the reason I say that is because this is a prime example of why, from the White Sox standpoint, they need to win that division. Because in the AL East, you have a lot of powerhouses, the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Rays, the Blue Jays, maybe the Orioles. Here in the AL West, the Astros are going to be in it. You can count Seattle as being in it. Maybe one of these other teams surprises you don't know. There's not a lot of options for wild card space. And so this means that with more competitive teams in both of these divisions, the Sox are really going to have to impress in their division and win the whole thing in the AL Central.
Agreed. And with a healthy Tim Anderson and a good bat in him and a good fielder in Anderson, I don't see why they don't compete. Their manager, again, and the manager from the Royals, what's his name? Oh, my God.
Pedro Grifol.
Thank you. My hopes are high for the White Sox. They really are. But I know we're talking about the AL West. So
yeah. Now, I do want to move over now to the NL West, which in and of itself is quite exciting. If I'm being honest, these teams are teams that I enjoy watching for a variety of reasons. They're just very exciting teams, and I think you all know which teams I'm talking about. But if we go ahead and we take a look at those standings moving over to the NL West, no surprise who's on top. The Dodgers had an incredible season last year, pushing out 111 wins and only 51 losses, and they had a whopping run differential of plus 334. I know, isn't that just make you just like giggle? It's just too.
Yeah. Which is why I don't understand why Tyler Anderson left. Why would you leave a team with 111 wins? Why? Like, you get to a point where, and again, we're veering off. I'm veering off a little, and I'll apologize. But Patrick Kane is on the trade market, or was on the trade market, because the Blackhawks are not going anywhere. And just today he announced, he's like, nope, I'm not being. No one's trading me. I'm staying a Blackhawk.
Yep.
So Kane has won, so he knows. So maybe that's what Tyler Anderson's deal is like, I've won, so I know. And why would you leave the Dodgers? Why?
That's a fair question, and I want to come back to the Dodgers because there's a few things that I think are worth talking about with the team that won 111 wins. So let's come back to that because it's worth some discussion.
Yep.
In second place, 22 games out of first, were the Padres with 89 wins. The San Francisco Giants were in third place at the same as the White Sox, 500, 81. And then rounding out at the bottom of the division was Arizona with 74 wins, and then the Rockies with 68. So you mentioned the Dodgers having the season that they did. Why would you want to leave? I believe that if there's any year that the Dodgers get kicked out of supremacy in this division, it's in 2023, and it's the Padres that kicks them out of the top spot.
There's so much excitement about the Padres. Did you see over the weekend, like the Padre, fest? Yeah, the Padre Fest. Oh my God, that blows the Cubs convention out of the water.
Absolutely. I mean,
ridiculous.
Well, and you know what's really cool about that is I was following the Padres Fan Fest and the Dodgers Fan Fest, and it must be nice to live in the West Coast in Cali where you can just open up the ballpark and have the fest at the ballpark. That's awesome.
That is awesome. Yeah, it's just a benefit for living out west, I guess. But just to see that excitement and with them picking up when we get to the pickups with everybody that the Padres, I almost said San Diego Chargers, Jesus. With everybody the Padres picked up, no wonder they're as excited as they are.
It's funny that you mentioned the Fan Fest because I obviously do most of the Twitter stuff for our Twitter page, folks. So if you want to follow the show on Twitter, you can follow us simply at Crosstown Show. And one of the tweets that I retweeted today was, and go ahead and check it out, it was two pictures from 2015 Padres Fan Fest where like no one was on the field, and then from 2023 where the whole outfield was packed. And I retweeted it and I said, this is literally all the evidence the White Sox need right here, because what happens when you invest money in your team? Well, all of a sudden people are interested and people come and people spend their money and you and the owner make more money. Guys, this is economics 101. I don't know how to explain this.
Yep. Got to spend money to make money.
Jeez. But yes, I do believe if there's any year where we're not talking about the Dodgers in the top spot in the NL West, finally, it could be this year. I think certainly the Padres are going to give them a run for their money. I mean, they knocked them out of the NLCS last year, or the NLDS last year. And then the Giants are the Giants. You know, I know they had a down year after their, surprise year in 2021, but they're a team that they've had some nice pieces over the offseason too, that we'll talk about here in a moment. So I think this division's very much up for grabs for the first time in a long time.
I would agree with you. I would say it's a solid 3-team race. I don't know that. I mean, I like the couple pickups from the Dodgers, without question, in JD Martinez and Syndergaard. But the Padres made quite the splash across the board. And I think they're going to be a team to be reckoned with. I think San Francisco is trying to shore up a few holes. If you look at everybody that they picked up, starting pitchers, outfielders. So we'll see. And then Arizona and Colorado.
So let's jump into that list. Okay. I have to share the list because there is a lot going on and perhaps a lot of nothing going on. So here, if you're looking at the list, we're looking at the Dodgers added, as you mentioned, JD Martinez, Noah Syndergaard, Jason Hayward, which just for sake of him being Jason Hayward, I put him on there. Right. And then they traded with the Marlins for Miguel Rojas, who they actually just signed the other day to a 2-year extension. The Padres picked up Nelson Cruz, Matt Carpenter, Seth Lugo, and the bigger fish, Xander Bogaerts, to play shortstop, because they said, you know what, we already have a really good shortstop, but guess what? Let's get another one because we like to play baseball and win games, so that's great.
That infield is going to be ridiculous.
Okay, absolutely ridiculous. They have Manny Machado at third, Xander Bogaerts at short. They're going to have a combination of Kim and Cronenworth at second. Maybe you actually have Cronenworth at first and Kim at second. I mean, there's so many options, and they're all just excellent, above average athletes. It blows my mind.
Yeah, they're going for it this year. They're all in.
The Giants, actually, like you said, great way to explain it, filling some holes. So Taylor Rogers for the bullpen, Michael Conforto finally signing back with the team after missing all of 2022. Mitch Haniger for the outfield, and then some above average starters in Ross Stripling and Sean Manaea. The Diamondbacks added veteran Evan Longoria, Miguel Castro for their bullpen. They added 2 outfielders in Lourdes Gurriel Jr. and Kyle Lewis. And then in that big trade that sent Dalton Varsho to the Blue Jays, they picked up Gabriel Moreno. And then the Rockies they're just the Chris Bryant show right now. It's kind of ridiculous.
Their stadium is beautiful. That's all I'm going to say. Like I was in Colorado last year, or the year before last, for vacation, and that stadium is gorgeous. It's beautiful to see the Rocky Mountains in the background. Yeah, it was the year before because they didn't have Bryant. Oh God, yeah, I got nothing. Honestly, for the Rockies, I don't have anything.
Well, that encapsulates my whole thought with the Rockies purely because of the Chris Bryant situation. You're sitting here saying I have nothing, and quite literally, the Rockies have nothing but Chris Bryant. And we don't know Chris Bryant. We don't know his family. We don't know him and his wife's situation. But to this day, I'm like, why would you sign with the Rockies and presumably put yourself into obscurity by going to? I don't understand.
Every other Cub that left went to a contender. Yu Darvish went to San Diego. At the time, Schwarber went to Boston. Everybody was leaving and going somewhere to make a difference, to be an impact player. And you chose Colorado on purpose. I don't believe, if I'm not mistaken, he's from Vegas, so he has no family in Colorado. We know you signed for the money. We all know you signed for the money, but you have fallen off the face of the earth. You literally have fallen off the face of the earth from a production standpoint in a place like Colorado where the ball flies. Mm-hmm. Your injuries have gotten the better of you. You've almost been. He was almost what I'm considering like did the Cubs catch lightning in a bottle with Chris Bryant getting his best years in the shortest time while he was 100% on the upswing. I compare him almost to Derrick Rose, as Derrick Rose was just flying and MVPing and everything else. He was going to be the next Michael Jordan, and there were talks of the Bulls retiring Derrick Rose's number. Mm-hmm. I mean, Chris Bryant could have, and I know financial situations are why Chris Bryant left, but why he chose Colorado. There's 30 teams, 29 of which are better than Colorado. And I don't mean it that way. Maybe Oakland's worse, but that's not even Oakland's fault. That's management's fault, upper management's fault. It just made no logical sense to me. None.
No, it didn't. And I'm even looking at it and just wondering what is the plan in Colorado? Because if you're in a division where the Dodgers and the Padres are not going anywhere anytime soon, and the Giants have made it very clear they want to compete with the best of them in that division, and they're serious about doing that. So if you're Colorado and you gave Chris Bryant all this money, but then don't refuse to reinforce everything else around him with money, like, what was the play there? And it's just, I can't figure it out, and I will not be surprised if they do what they did with Arenado, where they just trade the contract to St. Louis. He gets to play for a contender. I don't see Bryant as being long on the Rockies if they don't want to build around him soon.
Agreed. And if we go back up to the Giants, I'm surprised the Giants didn't do more to keep Chris Bryant, because that's a great ball. That's a great hitter's ballpark. I would say more so than Colorado. I know the ball flies in Colorado, but San Francisco competes every year. They've got a phenomenal fan base. That ballpark is a great place to hit. It would have made more sense for Chris Bryant as a ball player, as an impact player, to stay in San Francisco. Again, why did he leave?
Yeah. It just blows my mind, when I look at, the NL West, looking at this list of additions, looking at where things fell last year. It is, I kind of go back to the Dodgers, because one thing that you always think about with these teams that, for the last 10, 15 years are always, winning the division, or always competitive, or always in the playoffs. It eventually it fades. Even the best of teams like the Yankees have a couple off years. And so I'm starting to wonder when that happens with the Dodgers. And so when I look at the Dodgers lineup, I mean, I'm looking at it here in front of me, and I'm thinking, okay, well, you have, your big boys like Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman. You have Will Smith, the young, really productive catcher, Max Muncy. But After that, I mean, let's remember, folks, they don't have Justin Turner. They don't have Trey Turner. Those guys are gone.
I think
You don't have, Max Scherzer there anymore. He was there a couple years ago. Like, this team may very well, you may see them take a step back. Granted, not a step back where they're not in the upper echelon of this division, but are we seeing a change of events in LA?
I would agree with you. This is the end of their superiority as a team. To lose both Turners in the same year is, I think, going to be more impactful than they believe. I think San Diego is. I do. I think San Diego's coming hard. I think they're going to have a blast. I think they're going to be the team to watch. I think they're going to be the team to beat in the National League.
Well, and I'll say this: I don't want people out here thinking that I think that the Dodgers are going to tank, and I want to be very clear. I do think them taking a step back has even more to do with the Padres taking that step forward.
Correct.
If I'm being honest.
Correct. I think the 300-plus run differential was once in a lifetime. You're not going to get – so maybe their run differential is only 200, or 150. They're still going to dominate, but I still think – I'm telling you, San Diego and that crowd and their signing – the Bogart signing was huge. It was huge, and I think it's turned the tide. I do. Now, Dave Roberts is one of the best managers in all of Major League Baseball, and that's why the Dodgers are – he's one of the reasons the Dodgers are where they are. But again, with the loss of Turners, we'll see. I think San Diego is going to be fun to watch.
It will be. I'm really excited to catch their games. They were incredibly fun to watch in the playoffs last year, especially, I will say this, the whole reason, folks, we did these previews like we did, you may think, oh, well, why is it important to talk about all these teams? Why couldn't we just talk about the AL and the NL Central teams? But remember, folks, the whole reason we had this conversation is because for the first time ever in 2023, the MLB released what they're calling a balanced schedule. So instead of let's take the Sox, for example, playing the Royals 19 times and the Twins 19 times and the Tigers 19 times, there is a more balanced schedule where every team plays every other team in baseball. And it makes me think of kind of what you said earlier, Romanelli, where not only do we get to see our teams play other teams and see these other teams visit our ballparks, but you have more of a chance to see a Shohei Ohtani and a Mike Trout and a Fernando Tatis, and it just makes for better baseball. Like I'm so excited this year to go to a game where the Angels in town and the Cardinals are in town. Like, that's just good stuff.
Yeah, it is good stuff. So it'll be fun.
So what I do want to do is just give everyone a preview of when the Cubs and the Sox are actually playing some of these AL and NL West teams. So if we go to the Cubs, their first games this year against the AL West come April 7th through 9th, where they welcome in the Dodgers to Wrigley. Right after that, actually, they welcome in the Mariners. So they have quite a few games there against the AL West. And then, oddly enough, after those 6 games at home in April against the Rangers and the Mariners, they're actually on the road going to LA 14th, 15th, and 16th. So a lot of West teams for the Cubs in April. Now, here's what I'll ask you, Romanelli, and I was kind of shocked. I'm just looking at this for the second time since it released the schedule for the Cubs. They have in April, they open with the Brewers and the Reds. Yep. Then it's Rangers, Mariners, Dodgers, the A's, which don't matter, the Dodgers again, and then the Padres. This is leaning towards a little harder of a month for the Cubs in April.
Yep, you can, win or lose a division in April. The Cubs need to come out strong. They need to. When you're playing the Dodgers, when you're playing, you said Seattle?
They're playing in Seattle, and they're playing the Padres as well.
Yeah. When you're playing the Dodgers and the Padres right out of the gate, come on. Like, you better hope that the Padres, sorry. You better hope that the Padres haven't gelled by then. because if they're, and I know spring training doesn't matter, but having been to spring training and watched the Cubs in 2017, when your superstars got their 2 or 3 innings in, if they weren't tearing the cover off the ball, there was a problem. So if San Diego is tearing the cover off the ball in spring training, the Cubs are in a lot of trouble. Same with the Dodgers. If they're tearing the cover off the ball, they're in a lot of trouble.
Absolutely. Moving over to the White Sox schedule, looks like I talked about it earlier. They opened the AL West right away on opening day. They have a 4-game set against the Houston Astros to open up the season on March 30th. And then right after that, they come home for the home opener, which I'll be going to on Monday, April 3rd against the Giants. So they get Astros and Giants back to back, which will be a pretty good series or set of series there. What I will say is, or I guess what I'll ask you, Romanelli, is, we've spent time reviewing all of the divisions. We're wrapping that up here today. I would love to know, just from your perspective, if you had to pick one team that you're excited to kind of watch the Cubs play in 23, do you know what that team is right now?
That's a really good question. That is.
It could be multiple. It could be things that you just kind of have your eye on as we talked about all these teams.
Having been out to Seattle in my past, when I was younger, in my 20s, I've kind of had a special place for Seattle. As you can tell, I'm even wearing the Seattle Kraken jersey hoodie. So I'm excited for them to play Seattle. That's more of a personal thing. I want to see how they play against the big boys. So how are you going to do against the Dodgers? How are you going to do against the Padres? You measure greatness, you measure yourself against greatness. And right now the Dodgers are top of the heap. Jesus, that's music. Top of the heap. So if they can compete and go 500 on that West Coast trip, I'll be happy.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think there's this kind of mathematical equation, and I wish I remembered it right off the top of my head. I'll have to look it up for next show, but there's this, there was this equation out there where they broke the season to 3 different sets, like 40 games, 40 games, 40 games, or something like that, where it was like the 40 games that you're going to win, the 40 games that you're not going to win, and the 40 games where you kind of, it's a toss up.
Sure.
And yes, and those 500 series against the West, if they could go 500 this season against those harder West, maybe even the AL East or NL East teams, and then really kill it against the division, they could find themselves having a good year.
Yeah. I do find that, so you're talking about what the Cubs are capable of. I think it was ESPN today threw up the top 10 catchers in baseball. Guess who was number 5? I think his name is Wilson Contreras, who currently dons a Cardinals uniform.
You're going to find any opportunity to bring up your angst for that.
Dude, because it's going to come back to bite him in the ass. I'm telling you, the baseball gods are the only gods that exist. They're really the only gods that exist. The other thing, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I need you to test my 40 time. My computer's about to die and my charger's over there, which means I have to get off screen. I'll be right back.
Do it run. This is really funny. For those of you who are on YouTube, you're really missing a great show. You have to catch us on YouTube to watch, all of Romanelli's antics, because there are quite many of them. But what I'll say is, as we're waiting for Romanelli to get back here, it is a really good opportunity for the Cubs, quite frankly, to again tread water with those AL West and or NL West and NL East teams, because they find themselves in an opportunity where they're playing a division. We're looking at teams like Cincinnati Reds, Pittsburgh Pirates, Milwaukee Brewers. I don't expect them to be a very strong team next year, if we're being honest. So if they can find themselves being 600, 700 against those teams, they're in good shape. So there's a path to greatness for the Cubs. I don't want to say path to greatness. There's a path to being better than okay.
There's a path to being victorious. That's about it. There's a path to being victorious. Greatness? Yeah, I'm going to go with that. That is a hard no, my friend.
That was being too optimistic. Let's get real here.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. And then what I will say, to kind of kick the question back at myself, when I look at the Sox schedule and really think about kind of what I'm excited for, if I'm being honest, this is, and we'll talk about it more during our spring training episodes, this is a make or break year for the Sox. And what I want to know is when you are showing up at Minute Maid Park and you open the season, you have your new manager, you have a team that apparently has a chip on their shoulder. I want you coming out against the Astros in Houston and kicking ass. And I want you to take at least 2 of those games and split that series. That's what I'm looking for, because those 4 games will set the tone for me, and I want to see how these boys perform when they have a chip on their shoulder out of the gate.
I would agree with you. Almost like the Cubs, but even more so for the White Sox. They need to make some noise because that division is really theirs for the taking. The NL Central, I don't see anybody strong enough to run away with anything. I think it's anybody's division, except maybe the Pirates. But their park is so beautiful. But regarding the White Sox, if almost the same with the Cubs. If you can go out, if the Cubs can go out in the West and come back 500, and if the White Sox can go to Houston and come back 500, that's standing your ground. That is standing your ground. Now, you win 3 out of 4. All of a sudden, you tilt your head a little, just like you just did. Like, you win 3 out of 4. Then Grafal's making an impact, and some heads will turn. You take 3 out of 4 from Houston, some heads will turn.
Yes,
Instantly.
Absolutely. Well, these have been really fun to do, these division previews. That wraps up kind of our division preview series. And what I wanted to do, folks, is before we let you go today, just wanted to give you an update on what to expect going forward here at the Crosstown Baseball Show. We've had just a ton of fun. I speak for Romanelli and myself, a ton of fun doing these. We're really excited for what's ahead. And so I wanted to give you kind of a preview of some of the content that you're going to see coming up, starting with our flagship show, which is this, weekly Crosstown Baseball Show. And what we're going to be doing next week is we are diving into spring training. We are so close. I mean, I can't tell you, Romanelli, I don't think I've ever been, and I think I say this every year, I have never been as excited for baseball season as I am in 23.
I am quite excited to see what's going to happen. Excited for the Swanson Horner up the middle show over on the north side. Excited to see how they continue to progress. Let's see if Happ and Suzuki can do something. Will Bellinger have a rebound year, come back as player of the year kind of thing, and make some noise so the Cubs can win the division? I am excited. Good.
Well, we're going to be here talking all about it, shooting the shit, and we're going to start with spring training. And that means next week, folks, our show, and about 3 or 4 weeks after that, is going to be really focused on spring training. And we're going to start next week doing our spring training prediction show, where we're just going to talk about some of the things that we're expecting to see out of spring training and who's going to have a good spring, and maybe who wins some jobs out of spring. You never know. So we will do that next week. Just as a show update, next week we are going to be recording a show like we do on next Sunday night. Fun fact, I am traveling down to Florida with my family to visit family. They have Wi-Fi like everyone else, but we're going to record the show, and hopefully it all takes. I'm going to be out of my usual spot, but I will be giving you, along with Romanelli, the spring training predictions, and I will actually be 20-25 minutes from Lakeland, where the Detroit Tigers host spring training. So I may try to pop over there myself just to say hi to Javi Baez.
Yeah.
So that's coming up next week, as well as the next couple weeks. But a couple cool things that we have coming up for content. Number one, if you follow us on Facebook, and if you don't, get on that. But if you follow us on Facebook, you saw today we shared and we teased a new segment for our content called Letters to the Front Office. And so what that is at random times, may happen during an episode, may not, Anthony Romanelli or myself may go ahead and hop on here and just read out our letter, disgruntled or not, happy things, bad things, to the front office. And if you want to submit a letter to us because you want a letter read on our show to the owners of the front office of the Cubs of the Sox, welcome to join us. We'll go ahead and read your letter out loud for all to share. So that is something that's coming up soon. Watch out for that. Another thing you're going to see is some new content coming to our YouTube channel. You've seen we do these shows on YouTube. We do our Crosstown seat views on YouTube. But we are also soon going to be releasing videos called Crosstown Time Machine. And those videos are really short, like 5-minute videos talking about the history of both the Cubs and the White Sox. One of the first ones I may do is Disco Demolition, a 5-minute video on Disco Demolition. So we're going to be covering little snippets of history for you, talking about Cubs and Sox. I'm really excited about those. I'm a history guy. We're going to give you, really good, different content here on the Crosstown Baseball Show. Romanelli, any last words before we wrap up for the day?
No, same thing. I'm really excited about the history part because we both know our sports history, our Chicago Cubs and Sox history pretty well. So I'm excited to do a couple specific pieces that relate to Bill Veeck, who has his hat in both parks. So I'm excited for those. Excited to talk a little bit about Harry and Jack Brickhouse, and even go as far back from my childhood with Lou Boudreau as well. So excited for those. Excited to talk about the Sandberg game. Excited to talk about, oh my God, the Tuffy Rhodes game, who you've never heard from since. His 3 home runs opening day. Haven't heard from him since. There's a million. Dawson and his blank check. There's a million things.
There's good stuff coming your way, folks. And one of those things coming up is the Crosstown Baseball Show is going to have a fantasy baseball league, and it will include Romanelli and myself, and it will include any of our listeners who want to join our fantasy baseball league. And so look out for details on that soon. Just reach out to us if you're interested in participating. What we're going to do is one of our episodes on a Sunday night will be us talking through the draft as it's happening, and Romanelli and I giving you our kind of commentary as the draft unfolds. So that'll be a fun one. But remember, folks, please subscribe on YouTube. It helps us out so much when you subscribe. Our subscription numbers, if I can get out the word, have been going up exponentially, as well as our viewers, and so we appreciate that. Like and subscribe. On YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter. You can find me at Crosstown Sox, Romanelli at Crosstown Cubs, and our show at Crosstown Show. And we appreciate you listening. So until next time, go White Sox.
Go Cubs.
Take care, everybody.